Visit Medit Ortho.
Okay, there we go.
Login information as you have for your MeditLink account. So use your same username and password to get into it as your MeditLink account. And when you're in there, I'll show it to you in just a second now that I can share my screen. But in there is also a new consent form that you can get if you're going to use Medit aligners. So here's what the box looks like now when you purchase it. So there's the box. When you open it up, you get this little like tab to pull and lift out. It's kind of a nice looking box. It's got the little patient case there. And then, so when you fully open it, you can see the chewies, you can see the patient instructions, you can see the little carrying case with that little magnetic close. So it's nice. Everybody who's gotten an order actually says that, the product looks and feels very nice. They're very happy with it. Let me log into meditortho.com and show you that. So when you log into meditortho.com, it looks like this. So this is where you'd be able to see your cases in production, cases that have shipped, orders, and so your little dashboard. But before you log in, when you're on the actual meditortho.com page, if you scroll all the way down to the very bottom, there's a patient informed consent form down here. So if you want a patient informed consent, that is basically the same as the progressive aligners one. It just has the Medit logo on it. You can go and get that downloaded there for your case. All right, well, let's go ahead and jump in and look at a case. We have Dr. Lorenz here, and she had a request. So let's look at her case quickly here. So, Dr. Lorenz, this case, I think you had told me that you wanted, let me pull up your email here really quick, or you can unmute and remind me what it is that you were looking for. Hang on, I got to get to the right page.
Yeah, so we were just going to broaden the upper smile by expanding the premolars and just aligning the front teeth.
This is the one that we looked at previously,
Yeah,
right?
you looked at it before, but I think
Yeah.
I recall you saying you wanted to look at it before I submitted it.
Yeah, and so I think you said here that you had some questions that you wanted no bite ramps on 8 and 9. And so did we have bite ramps on there before?
No,
Okay. Did you want bite ramps on there, or were you asking whether or not we should consider putting them on?
I was asking because we're intruding the lower anteriors, but then I see that 8 and 9 are extruding a little bit.
Yeah. So I actually don't consider the bite ramps as really there to help with the intrusion. It's not like it's adding anything to help with the intrusion, but I do like it on deep bite cases because if they're able to clench, deep bite cases tend to have the strong muscles. And so if they're able to clench on the back of the aligners, on their back teeth, they tend to intrude the back teeth, which will deepen the bite in the front. So my main purpose for using the lingual bite ramps is either one, if we're trying to correct a cross bite to kind of uncouple the occlusion, or
Mhm.
two, if they have a functional shift that we're trying to resolve, or three, if they have deep bite, I'm doing that. I guess maybe you could say it supports a little bit the intrusion to fix the deep bite, but mostly it's to keep them from being able to bite on their back teeth and causing intrusion there. So I don't see in this case that the lingual bite ramps, because it's not really a deep bite case, it doesn't look like a real strong muscle patient, is probably going to be very helpful.
Okay.
And then I guess your only other question on that one was the wear schedule. And I would start with 10 days.
Mhm.
I mean, I would start with 14 days, so the 2 week wear schedule. And if things seem to be tracking well by the time you get to like a liner 3, 4, 5, and you want to go to 10 days, then that would be fine. That's kind of how I would approach it.
Okay.
And so in your case, we had some, you're going to see these little these little rotation ridges to help with the rotation of those incisors and a little bit on that canine as well. And what other features do we have on here? We have a really big attachment on that lateral incisor, which just a second ago we were talking about putting attachments on the lingual. But I guess the thing to remember is attachments on the lingual could also be like an occlusal interference.
Hmm.
And so I think you're gonna, if you don't see this lateral tracking, like if we're having any problems with the lateral tracking, then we could consider putting a little attachment on the lingual. But we put this nice big attachment on the buccal, and I think that's probably going to engage quite well on the aligner and probably do just fine. So I think this case looks good and is probably ready to go ahead and order. And but again, you could decide to order all 18. So when you go to order this one, let's just click on it really quick and see when you go to complete this. It'll be
Paul,
order method. Yeah.
um, look at the anterior view. Okay. Yeah, I think if you added a little bit more labial crown torque on the two upper upper canines,
Yeah.
that would help the alignment of the lateral, and it would also make it look a little bit better. I I I heard they want to make a broader smile. It's just a thought.
Yeah, we could do that.
I would add more labial root torque on the upper. I mean, I'm sorry, labial crown torque on the upper threes, just a little
Okay.
bit.
Yeah, I think I might hesitate on the upper right because there's already quite a bit of overjet there. But I think on the upper left, it's a little bit tight and could certainly benefit from that. So let's do that really quick. So we're going to click that tooth and then we're going to click inclination right here. And then I'm going to click that I want that from the root apex. And then let's just use our little single click tool here to just control how much we move it out. Maybe just those 2 clicks right there. Now that seems to match the amount of overjet we have on the other side.
Okay, now look at if they have the same inclination, right versus left. Yeah, that looks similar.
Let's look at it. Let's look at it from this view right here.
Yeah, I think I'd put a little bit more,
A little bit more on this one.
actually on one
On the
three, 1 3. I think I might put more lingual root torque on that.
lingual root torque or labial crown torque.
Uh, both. But anyway, labial crown torque.
So let's push that out a little bit.
Yeah, just a couple notches. There you go.
Okay.
Yeah, that looks better to me.
All
Give a
right.
little bit of freedom too for the alignment of the lower incisors,
Mm-hmm.
sort of thing. Just
So
a
when we
small.
go, yeah, when we go to order this, then here's what you're going to do. And I'll send this to you when we are done with this here, Dr. Lorenz. I'll resend this back to you. But
Okay.
when you go to put it back in yours and go to order it, you'll have these options here. So you're going to click order Medit aligners, confirm. See now you have stage selection 1 through 17. And you're going to click new patient. And you're going to include attachments. And if you wanted to, because right now 1 through 17, you can see here, I don't know, it's mine. This is a magnification problem because I'm plugged into another screen, but you see that it's ordering maxilla 1 through 17 and mandible 1 through 13. So you have a choice here whether you want to only order 1 through 13 in both upper and lower, and then rescan and do a little like fine tuning at the end. or whether you want to order maybe one or two passive aligners in the lower while you go through the whole 17 in the upper, or maybe you only want to order the first 10. So let's say you wanted to add a couple of passive lowers so that you could have a few aligners for the patient to wear in the lower while they're finishing the upper. Then what you would do is you would click right here where it says attachment templates, passive aligners, and retainers. You click here and you would say, here we're getting our attachment template at stage 0. And I want in the mandible, I want from stage number, let's see, this is 10, 11, 12, 13. I want maybe 2 additional 13s. So I would type in 13, comma 13. There's no space. I think I have to put no space. So 1313 would be the same as saying I want basically 3 versions of stage number 13 in the lower, because it would give me up to stage 13 and then it would give me 2 passive stage 13. So that's how you would get a couple of passive ones in the lower for them to have a few to wear and change as they finish in the upper. Or you could just say, I only want to order 1 through 13. And now you're only going to get upper and lower 1 through 13, and then you'll rescan at that stage and redo the case and finish up any little movements that still need to happen at that point. So that would be 2 different ways to approach ordering this case.
Okay. And I can order the attachment template at stage 2 or something like that too.
Whatever you prefer. So if you want to do stage 2 or 3, then you would just change that here. You would say 2. And right now it's a little bit confusing because it makes it seem like you're ordering 2 templates. But if you read the instructions up here, it's telling you that this box is whatever number here, that's the stage that you're getting. And in the new version that comes out in April, they're going to make that a little bit more clear because it's kind of confusing. You might think that this is quantity, but over here is not quantity, it's stage number. So if I put in 1313, it's saying I want 2 passive aligners, both of which are from stage 13. And then the same thing when I go to order retainer. If I want like an upper and lower retainer, I would put maxilla 17 and mandible 13, which would give me a retainer at, those 2 final stages. So that's the way it's currently programmed, but they'll probably be making that a little bit more obvious when they redo it. But that's how you're going to order it when you go to actually place your order for this patient.
Okay, perfect.
Okay.
Yeah, thank
So
you.
I'll save this one. Did you have any other questions about this one?
No, I don't think so.
Okay, cool. I'll save this one and send it back to you.
Okay, so the upper lateral, the 2-2, you think 1 big buckle attachment is enough?
Yeah, I do actually.
Okay.
Because it staged nicely where it creates the space and everything. So I think it's going to do well.
Okay.
Let's look at the other case. Because you did send, which I didn't realize I hadn't replied to you, but you sent like a little class 3 case. Do you want to look at that?
Yeah, I think you did reply.
Okay. So let me share this desktop. And let's open that one up. Give me a second here. I have a little bit of a magnification problem when I've got my other screen plugged in, but that's okay. All right, so does this look like this is the other case? Whoops, a little bit of a class 3, pretty straightforward case. Whoops, I didn't mean to do that. I meant to erase all of the. So I'm going to trim this little portion right up here. Sometimes that causes problems when you just have weird things hanging out in space. Besides that, I don't see that we need to fill any holes. It looks like a really nice scan. Nice job.
By the way, do you have to do any specific, um, doing a trim on the distal or anything like that when you send in the Medit aligners, or are they going to do any of that?
If it's poorly, if we don't have a good scan on the distal, their job is to do that trimming back there.
Okay, and if there's excess, like you just trimmed off excess, they'll do that as well.
Yeah, I only trimmed it off only because sometimes those things can cause weird things in the simulation. But if it's not, you would have seen it. So then it just comes down to, yeah, if it's not captured well or there's some weirdness back on the distal, because we don't have any control right now over the trim line. They're the ones that are setting the trim line. So that's their job, is to make sure that the trim line is appropriate. So if the distal part doesn't look good, they'll trim the aligners, short of that distal so that it looks correct.
Or if there are holes, they'll fill the holes.
They'll fill the holes. Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
And
All
block
right.
out any.
So let's go ahead and do this case real quick. See how much a nice scan just really, it's really easy to identify the teeth, and it does a really great job of segmenting the teeth and numbering them. Let's go in and clean up the distal part of this one just a little bit with a little brush. And tooth numbering. I'm going to start with this back tooth, because if you hit the back one, just like dominoes, all the rest of them fall into place. So now I've got all the numbering correct. And now we do have a retained primary tooth, but we're not going to label that as primary because I don't want to swap it out. I assume we're keeping this tooth. We're not trying to do anything different with that. You're just looking more at anterior alignment here, Dr. Lorenz?
Correct.
Yeah. So let's go and edit this spot. This was the only one that didn't segment well. So I just erased everything and clicked on the tooth, and now that looks well identified. So this one, not a lot of work to do here. Everything looks great. So we'll go ahead on to the next step. Now this arch form is going to be a little bit constricted on the lower, but if we went bigger than that, say the medium or the non-extract ovoid 1, it's going to be quite expanded. So I'm going to stick with the medium ovoid. And if we're just going to be looking more at anterior alignment, it's really not going to matter much anyway, because we're just going to be looking at 3 to 3, and then we can do manual movements on any of the other teeth if we want. So that should be fine for this one. And now it's showing as a class 3 case. And it does look like it has some dental compensation. Those lower incisors are a little bit retroclined. But again, we're not going to be doing any mechanics to change the bite on this case in the back. So I'm going to go ahead and just click class 1. Doesn't really matter because I always have those options later to just select the anterior alignment, which it sounds like is what we're looking for on this case. I'm going to challenge somebody in this group to do a full case where we're treating all the teeth and not just doing these anterior alignment cases. By the way, for all of you guys who are progressive grads, we've worked out I don't know if we talked about this before, but there's basically a payment cap. So for a case, if you're going to do a full case, you pay as you go. So if you do maybe a hybrid case and you do brackets first and get yourself all the rotations and the difficult things corrected, and then you do these aligners, you may finish up only paying maybe $400 or $500 for the aligners. So you get the benefit of your efficiency if you only spend a certain amount. So you're not overpaying for your aligners. But if you end up needing more than that, you guys have a price cap. And so it'll be capped at $11.99. So you won't go over $1,200 per case unless you're paying for shipping. So the only thing you pay after you hit your price cap is going to be shipping after that. So that should give you the confidence to go in and do some of these complete cases instead of just the anterior alignment cases, knowing that the most you're going to pay for the case, however many aligners you need to do it, is going to be $1,200. So here's the complete alignment, but this is probably more than what you want for this case. So let's just look at all of the teeth getting aligned. And normally if we have a ceph and we have a width, you can almost visualize it here. You can see how the lower jaw is in front of the upper. You can almost see just by looking at the soft tissue that this would have a class 3 skeletal. But because we don't have the ceph, it's not measuring that and putting in the dental compensation. So you can see that in the final tooth position in simulation 1.1 versus the original scan. Watch when I click back and forth here. You can see how much it's proclining those lower incisors, which would be a lot of lingual root torque. And so if you look at that lower arch, look at how much of it changed right in that lingual area as I toggle back and forth. And you can kind of imagine how much resistance there would be to that kind of a movement. And so we actually do want that dental compensation. So the way we get it when we don't have the Ceph, let's turn this off, is right down here is this little dental compensation tool. Okay, so what I want is I want some dental compensation. So I'm going to turn it on and say that let's look at the maximum amount of class 3 first, and maybe that's too much, but let's look at it compared to the start. Do you see how it then went back to kind of more what you saw in the start? It's got a lot of proclination in the upper, but the lowers are looking more retroclined like we would want it. So maybe let's look at the moderate one and see what that looks like. That looks a little bit closer to what we have at the start, the moderate, instead of the maximum one. And then let's see what it looks like if we go to this limited anterior only. And we need to do a little bit of individual tooth alignment here, but that's probably looking a lot closer to what we would be looking for. But look at that overjet. It's going to be pretty tight. So we might want IPR in the lower. Let's fix this one tooth inclination really quick. I know we can do it later, but let's just do it at this stage on that one tooth that looks a little bit out of alignment. I probably could have done that central too. I probably should have done that central incisor real quick as well. Let's do those centrals really quick here. That should look better. Okay, so here we could choose 1.13, which puts IPR in the lower arch only. And that might be a good starting place for us then when we go to the aligner output. It's probably going to be, our goal is to get us as close as we can using the automation before we start having to use the manual tools. And I feel like this probably gets us the closest to what we want without me having to do a lot of work. So I'm going to go with this. Go to the aligners. And then we'll go in and use the manual tools to just clean it up a little bit. And then we can play with the amount of IPR. We can, I don't know, that canine got intruded probably a little bit more than we wanted to. So from here, what I'm going to do is click on the treatment refinement tool. And you have two ways now to visualize the movements that are happening. So let's just focus on the upper arch for a second. I can either just click, if you click on the model, it doesn't work. You have to be on the gray part of the screen. And if I just click on and off, it toggles back and forth so that I can see what's moving. And things can jump out to my eye that I'm like, yeah, I don't really want that. For example, that intrusion on that canine, I don't want that much intrusion on that canine. So I can click on that tooth and you see 0.8 intrusion. Now I have a couple ways to adjust it. I can just click on intrusion and go back and manually change it. And you can see the number changing when I do that. So I can change it here. Or another option, let me put it back at the 0.8 where it had. Another option is I could just come here and click one click at a time. I went the wrong direction. So I could just click one click at a time until I like the position. Or I could have just selected the 0.8 and typed in 0 and hit enter. And then it would automatically adjust the tooth over here to have no intrusion. So now when I click on and off, you can see that tooth is still getting aligned in all the other ways, the rotation and the labial movement, but it doesn't have the intrusion anymore. So that's one way to evaluate, is to just kind of click on and off and see what's moving. Now that kind of intrusion on that lateral is jumping out at me. Or you can open your tooth movement data and just quickly look for larger numbers here and go, oh, look at 2.2 has got 1.2 of extrusion. Is that what I want? I better go check that. Any other big numbers here? Look at that's a 24-degree rotation. Well, let's make sure and check that. And then angulation change, the 2.2's got a pretty large, 2.1 and 2.2 have a pretty large angulation change. So that's another way to like have things jump out at you is if you're a numbers person, you can look here at the tooth movement data and go back over here and say, well, let's look at that lateral. Do I really want that much extrusion? And if you look at it and you're like, yeah, that actually looks good. I like that. Then all right, we'll leave that. What about the rotation? Yeah, it does need that much rotation. What about the angulation change? You can see there's an 8-degree angulation change there. And you go, yeah, actually, I do want that angulation change. So it's one way to get some of the numbers to jump out at you. And then you can look at it and see if you actually want that change there. Because sometimes you'll see a real big number like an 18-degree angulation change. And when you look at it, you might see the canine having a big angulation change that actually doesn't make it look better. And then you can reduce the amount of that angulation change. So for me on the upper, I'd probably look at it and go, I don't really know that we need intrusion of those upper teeth because the patient doesn't really start out with a deep bite. So maybe I'll just go ahead and get rid of the intrusion on all of these teeth and just any upper anterior tooth, I'm just going to select it and type 0 and then adjust it from there. Or I could go manually move that. See, but when I put it back, it wasn't intrusion that was happening, it was extrusion, right? So I want to undo that because that actually does look better, doesn't it? But maybe I don't want the intrusion of the incisor of the central, so let's get rid of that. What do we got going on here? Maybe we even need a little bit of extrusion on this tooth. That one needs to go up a little bit. Okay, so now the upper is looking pretty good. It's a good start. Let's have a quick look at the lower. Maybe we have too much. Let's look at this view here. We might be moving those laterals out just a little bit too far to the buccal, but that's not a bad overcorrection to start with since they're starting out to the lingual. So in the lower, you guys see the angulation change that's jumping out to me on that incisor right here? That's a 7-degree angulation change. Let's just reduce that down to maybe 3. And then you can see it change the IPR there. So I can either go and change it up here on the IPR, or I can click, free movement, and I can just go reposition that tooth a little bit more to the mesial. What else we got going on in the lower? So here's the start, and there's the finish. That tooth is kind of getting pushed in a little bit too far, in my opinion, a little bit too much rotation correction. So let's fix that rotation. Oops, that's not the movement I wanted. And let's fix that one a little bit. That's got a big angulation change too. Look at 7 degrees mesial. That's too much. So let's go ahead and get rid of that and put that down at like 3 and see what that looks like. And that looks better. So why don't we do this? I'm going to get rid of all of this space in IPR really quick, and then we'll just go manually add it back in and see what we need to get the overjet correct. A little bit of a rotation correction that's needed here as well. So let's fix that. And then let's look at our overjet. And we definitely need some lower IPR, but let's be a little bit more focused on where we want it. Let's add it where we have these bigger embrasures or these bigger black triangles between these incisors up in the front, because it seems like that's where we're having the overjet problem as well. We'll zoom in and get this so they're not overlapping. And maybe we move those centrals, the upper centrals out just a little bit, because that might match the laterals a little bit better. So let's go back to the upper tooth movements. And let's see about just tipping those out a little bit further. And let's see what that did for our overjet. And that's looking a little bit better. Still seeing the weird angulation change on this canine. How much angulation change is there? 7 degrees. Let's make that a little bit smaller. That looks better. And then we'll get rid of the space that created. Okay, so let's go back and see what this looks like. We might have another tooth or two that needs to be adjusted, but that should get us pretty close to what we want. And again, when you look at the lower crowding on this one, you go, hey, there's 21 aligners being predicted here in the lower. I'm probably not going to order 21 aligners. I'd look at this case with that lower crowding and go, you know what? With all that crowding down there in the lower, this might be a better case to just really focus on the first, say, 10 aligners where we're just opening up all that crowding like we were talking about before. And then if we were to rescan somewhere around 10, 11, 12, we're going to have much better scan of all these interproximal areas and all these parts of the teeth that were, covered up by overlap that have been computer simulated. So rather than focus on getting all the final positions ideal, I would just look at this and go, do I like what's happening in these first 10 aligner stages or these first 12 aligner stages? Yeah, it's just moving everything outwards, starting to correct rotations. This would be a great place to go ahead and get a revision done, scan again, and rework the case. Let me look at this canine. Maybe we'll get rid of, there's still a little bit of angulation there that I don't really love, so maybe we get rid of that. But I don't think in this case that I would spend any more time dialing in every last tooth position. Yeah, see, that's a 9.5 degree change. So let's reduce that down again to I'm just throwing a number like 3 or 4. And then we'll recalculate that. So now when we look at this, let's get it back where we have a good view of it. Now that looks more appropriate to me for those first 10 stages, 10, 12 stages. Yeah, so I kind of like up to about number 12 or 13. I like what's happening in the lower arch. It looks predictable. And then from there, we could get somewhere around 11 or 12. We could get a new scan and really improve things from there. In the upper, let's see what the first.
And then you have the IPR coming right there at number 14. So you would do the IPR at the at when you do the rescan.
Yeah.
So you go to 12, then do the IPR on the lower and rescan.
Yep. So you would basically say, and you could also reevaluate your overjet at that point and really see whether you feel like you want to do that IPR, but it does give you great access to those contacts to do that IPR. You already know basically how much you have planned. So maybe you go in and do 0.3 between each of these teeth before you rescan. And now you're going to have much better tracking with your, the rest of your case, which will basically be finishing at that point because you've opened up all the crowding, you've unraveled all the problems, and now you can really get in and fine tune how you want all those final tooth positions. But rather than spend a bunch of time right now dialing every fine detail of it, I would just order this case, up to aligner number 12, probably, or 12 or 13. And that's how I would start this case and then go from there. So as far as the attachments, let's see what's happening in the lower again. I kind of like for visualizing what attachments are needed. I've actually requested that they allow us to do the same little movement thing right here when we're in the attachment, because I can't do it when I'm looking at attachments, but I want to see the teeth moving so I get a feel for what really needs to have an attachment. And, in this case, if it was me, I'd probably just put attachments on those canines. I think you have enough retention with the shape of these posterior teeth that you probably don't need much aligner retention. I see undercuts along here. And since this is a straight trim line aligner that you're going to get, I think you're going to have plenty of retention. And we've seen that these lower incisors can actually align pretty well without having attachments on them. Maybe we'll put a little rotation ridge on one or two. But as far as the attachments on the lower, I would just keep them on those canines and I'd get rid of them off of these incisors. But maybe we will do, how about we put a rotation ridge on the lower left one? So on the mesiolingual and the distal buccal. So distal buccal and mesiolingual. We need to drag this one across. I've made a request to have those show up on the lingual side when I click on the lingual side, but currently you kind of have to do this drag it across thing. But we'll do that. And then let's do it on this lateral incisor as well. I think that one was the opposite. It needed the distal buccal and drag this one across. There it goes. And the mesiolingual. Let's go back and look at the movements and see if we put them in the right spot. Yeah. And then in the upper, we are extruding that lateral and we are rotating that canine quite a bit. Actually, too much, aren't we? Let's change that rotation of that canine a bit. Or we can keep it because this is going to be the over rotation and we're going to be rescanning anyway. So I'd probably put some attachments on the upper laterals and the upper canines in the upper. So let's go back here and on the laterals, let's delete this one. On the laterals, let's make them, I'm going to keep this one and just change the orientation. And let's move it down the tooth a little bit. Whoops, didn't mean to do that. Let's move it down the tooth a little bit. And then let's change the orientation so we have more pushing surface on the gingival side so that it can actually push that tooth down. You see how this is kind of large? If I go with the horizontal one, like you'll see it happen if I do it over here. If I put on the horizontal one, it tends to be a little bit smaller. So if you like this look better, see how that's a little bit, it doesn't stick out from the tooth as far. We can change that over here. I actually probably like that better. This is pretty big. So let's delete that. And let's go with the horizontal one. Move it down the tooth and change the orientation a little bit. Tip it downward like that. And then on the canines, let's just put 2. And let's make that a larger one. And let's keep this one, but make it larger. So this is how I would do this case, and I would go ahead and just order the first probably 12. Any thoughts from you guys who are watching? Something you might change?
It's good.
We need a little bit more buckle crown torque on that canine. So let's put that in and then we'll be done. So we're going to tip that to the labial a little bit. Wrong way. I always do the wrong way first. It's like when you're plugging in a USB port. I always do it the wrong way first. I don't know why. You think I'd guess better. All right. Any thoughts, Dr. Lorenz, while we got you here?
It looks good.
You happy with that to just go ahead and order the first, say, 12?
I think so.
Because really, I mean, it seems like your posterior teeth. I mean, we could do a little changes. I just don't see that we're getting any benefit from really moving any of the back teeth on this one. So I would just focus on kind of forget what's happening after like 12 and just say, do we like where we're headed? And I really think we're headed in a great direction there. So that's kind of your first golf swing. And then from there, we rescan, you do your IPR. So kind of plan on doing 0.3 in between these 3 lower contacts. And then we'll go from there. So when you go to order this one, you'll go 1 through, let's say, 12. And then wherever you want to place your attachments. So I was going to tell you with the attachments, the only thing, but if you're going to change it, you're going to go right here and say attachments on, say, aligner number 2 or 3 or whatever you want to do. The only thing to watch when you're doing your attachments is if you look at the first 2 stages, like with progressive aligners, they always send you the very first stage is a passive stage. So stage 1, you'll find is actually passive. And the reason why they do that is because sometimes the teeth will shift around from when you scanned to when you get the aligners delivered. So stage 1 is passive, but it is moving all the teeth back exactly into the start position of the scan, making sure that everything fits well. And so you don't really have that in this case, because at stage 1, you can see there's already a little bit of movement happening. And so as long as those movements look predictable, and we don't really have any control over what happens in what stage, so as long as it looks predictable, and we can look at the little tooth movement chart and see what's happened by that point. Actually, I don't think we have stage by stage tooth movements. I think we just have total tooth movements. But my only point is if you have any extrusion, for example, happening between stage 0 and 1 and 1 and 2, then you could end up having a movement that's not tracking perfectly because you don't have an attachment there. And then when you go to put the aligner or the template on later, the tooth isn't fitting perfectly into that template. So that's my only hesitation for going too late in the game on these and maybe starting at aligner number 1. But if you have a lot of attachments, it can also make it really retentive. So if you like starting at number 2, that's not a bad place to start. It gives the patient maybe 2 weeks to get in and, or 3 weeks or whenever they can come in next and get used to getting their aligners in and out and kind of get the teeth moving a little bit. Make sure that fits perfectly so that when you go use the template for number 1, it actually fits really well. And that might be a thought, is put it at number 1. And that way, when they come back in, you're putting them on what's fitting for number 1. If you say number 2 for the template, that means that you're going to be putting it on when they're ready to get stage number 3. So if you say you want stage 3, that actually means that you have to have finished wearing aligner number 3 before you try to get the template in there. So just be aware of that when you go to order your template. Any other questions or thoughts, guys? I'll save this and send these both to you, Dr. Lorenz.
Thank you so much.
Well, thank you guys for joining us. I know we're not a big group now at this point, but I really do enjoy learning together and our time together. And Don, I appreciate your insights and input. And, excited to get some of you in this group using Medit aligners on a full case and let's do it. Let's learn it and see how it goes. I'm here to support. All right. Have a great evening or wherever you are. Great rest of your day, and we'll see you guys in a couple weeks.
Thank
See
you.
you.
Okay.
Thank you.
See ya.